In the first video of this series, we familiarized ourselves with our game and got it set up for installing mods. In this video, we'll actually start installing mods, specifically the essential mods. All the mods we're going to install in this video are mods that you'll want to have regardless of how you want to mod your game. These mods fix major bugs, come with no downsides, should cause no conflict with future modifications you install, and a lot of these mods will be required for other mods to work. So welcome to the second episode of the Ultimate Modding Guide for San Andreas. The first modification we're going to make will be to the game's executable, by increasing the amount of RAM the game can use. San Andreas is a 32-bit game, which means by default it can only use 2 GB of your system RAM for tasks. This isn't ideal when modding, as a lot of mods can actually increase the amount of memory the game needs to perform well. Most of us have 64-bit PCs now, and more than 2 GB of RAM, so the limitation on how much RAM the game can use isn't ideal when we have hardware the game could take advantage of. With 32-bit applications like San Andreas, you can actually enable a flag inside the executable called Large Address Aware, and this basically allows a 32-bit application to use more than 2 GB of RAM. It isn't limitless, but instead it increases the limit from 2 GB to 4 GB on a 64-bit PC, and on a 32-bit PC, this flag increases the RAM limit from 2 GB to 3 GB. You can check if your PC is 32-bit or 64-bit in the About section on your PC. The game can have a max stream memory limit of 2 GB. This is used for streaming in and out the game world. And it'll use around 1 GB for other tasks, so 3 GB is usually more than enough. We'll go more into this later though when we take a look at the game's limits. So while there are general tools that enable this flag for 32-bit applications, there is one built specifically for the GTA games, simply called Large Address Aware. So let's download and use it. Step 1. Download Large Address Aware from the link in the description. Step 2. Open the archive that you just downloaded and move largeaddress.exe into your main San Andreas folder. Step 3. Simply drag your San Andreas exe file and place it on the largeaddress.exe file. Accept the UAC pop-up when asked. Step 4. Type the letter Y for yes and hit enter. This will allow the tool to patch the exe. For those of you on 32-bit systems, you'll need to turn the 3 GB switch on in your Windows installation for this to work. I'll leave a link to a small tutorial on how to do this. It's fairly simple. Again, this is only for 32-bit systems, which most people won't be using now. And that's it. San Andreas is now patched to use up to 4 GB of RAM on 64-bit systems or up to 3 GB of RAM on 32-bit systems. The tool also creates a backup of your original exe file. You don't really need it, but that's what this file is. You can delete it if you like. You can also delete largeaddress.exe too. If you launch your game through Steam, make sure you also use this tool on GTA-sa.exe, as Steam uses this exe instead of GTA_sa.exe. So next up, we'll install an ASI Loader. ASI Loaders basically load ASI plugins. These are mods with the .asi file extension, and they're typically mods that alter the game's memory, which is pretty much changing the actual game engine. They're called plugins because that's basically what they do. They plug in to the game's executable and make changes to the game's memory. A lot of the more advanced mods will be in this format, and it's likely you'll download a lot of ASI mods during your time modding San Andreas. There's only two ASI loaders that I'd recommend using: Ultimate ASI Loader and Silence ASI Loader. I prefer to use Ultimate ASI Loader myself, and that's what I'm going to show you how to install in this guide. But installation for Silence ASI Loader is literally the exact same, so if you prefer to use that, you can. To the end user, there's basically no difference between these two loaders, so use whichever you like. So, let's install Ultimate ASI Loader like I said. Step 1. Download the latest version of Ultimate ASI Loader from the link in the description. Please be careful what version you download. I've had a lot of people from my old guide download the 64-bit version of Ultimate ASI Loader and then complain it doesn't work. The 64-bit version is only for 64-bit games, not 64-bit operating systems. San Andreas is only 32-bit, so we don't need the 64-bit ASI Loader. Step 2. Once you've downloaded the ASI Loader, open the archive you just downloaded and extract dinput8.dll anywhere except your San Andreas folder. Step 3. Rename the .dll to vorbisfile.dll. That's vorbisfile.dll. The reason we have to rename is because Ultimate ASI Loader works for a ton of different games, and depending on the game it has to have a certain name. For San Andreas it's vorbisfile.dll. Just a quick note, if you're installing Ultimate ASI Loader for GTA 3 and Vice City, you don't need to rename this file. Step 4. Simply move your renamed file to your San Andreas folder, replacing the original vorbisfile.dll when asked. Okay, you now have Ultimate ASI Loader installed. At this point, I'd recommend running the game just to make sure you've installed it correctly. If the game launches, it means you've done it correctly. If it doesn't, you'll get an error saying something like this, and you've likely downloaded the wrong version of Ultimate ASI Loader. Just remember, vorbisfile.dll will always be an ASI loader in San Andreas. Some mod authors will include an ASI loader packaged with their mods because they don't trust some users to have one installed. But if you download a mod in the future and it has vorbisfile.dll, just remember that you don't need it. You already have an ASI loader installed, and the ASI loader you just installed doesn't need to be replaced. So, we just installed an ASI loader. Let's install an ASI mod. The first ASI mod we'll be installing is CLEO. CLEO is actually kind of similar to an ASI loader, in the sense that for the average user, CLEO is just there to load CLEO scripts, the same way an ASI loader is just there to load ASI plugins. And that's basically all CLEO is. It's an ASI mod that loads CLEO scripts. Now, what are CLEO scripts? Well, a little history first. San Andreas has a main script called main.scm. This contains logic for all the missions in the game, and this script is written in a programming language we call SCM. SCM has been reverse engineered and knowledge has been shared between the modding community since GTA 3 released in 2001, and with that knowledge, modders have made some fantastic mods using SCM. But there was a big problem in the early days of modding. The game only has one main.scm file, so if you made an SCM mod, it was pretty hard to share it with other people. Either they used your main.scm file, which has your own code added to it, or the code was shared separately, and people would have to add it to their own main.scm file, which isn't exactly ideal. Along with that, if you made changes to the game's main script, which again is the main.scm file, a lot of the time you would have to start a new game after making those changes, as changing the game's script would break its compatibility with saves. This is actually why your saves don't work when you downgrade San Andreas. It's because Rockstar had to make changes to main.scm. So, where does CLEO play into all of this? CLEO allows modders to make scripts in SCM, but instead loads them outside of the game's main script. So, you could add SCM mods without breaking your saves. Along with that, the mods were much easier to share with people as the scripts made for CLEO were separate from the game's main script. CLEO scripts use the .cs file format. On top of that, CLEO adds more functionality to the SCM language, allowing modders to do even more than Rockstar originally could with SCM. CLEO also allows other modders to make their own scripting commands with CLEO plugins, which again further extends the functionality of the SCM language. CLEO plugins use the .cleo file format. We'll check out CLEO plugins in a minute. CLEO scripts can also alter the game's memory, just like ASI plugins can, but most modders usually prefer to do things like that with ASI plugins rather than CLEO scripts, as CLEO scripts load after the game has executed. So, that's a long bit of history out of the way, and you now know the difference between CLEO scripts and ASI plugins. So let's actually install CLEO to our game now. Step 1. Download the latest version of CLEO from the link in the description. Step 2. Open the archive you just downloaded and copy the CLEO folder, the scripts folder, base.dll, cleo.asi, and vorbishooked.dll into your San Andreas folder. We don't need vorbisfile.dll as we already have an ASI loader like I said before. And that's it. CLEO is now installed. The scripts folder that comes with CLEO is actually an ASI Loader feature. You can place your ASI plugins into the scripts folder and the game will load them from there instead of the main game folder. For example, we can move CLEO.asi into the scripts folder and it'll still work. However, not all ASI plugins will work from the scripts folder. Usually older ASI plugins that load additional files won't work. Despite CLEO.asi working inside the scripts folder, I prefer to leave this in the main game directory. Your CLEO scripts actually go into the CLEO folder, so don't get these mixed up. We'll be installing some CLEO scripts later on, but for now, let's move on to installing some vital CLEO plugins. I mentioned CLEO plugins before. Don't mix these up with CLEO scripts, which is mostly what CLEO mods are. CLEO plugins are files which have the .cleo file type. As of this video, CLEO itself comes with 3 plugins, which is what allows modders to make CLEO scripts. However, there have been CLEO plugins made by other modders which extend the capabilities of CLEO even further, allowing modders to make even more advanced CLEO scripts. There are 2 main CLEO plugins that you'll run across while modding San Andreas: NewOpcodes and CLEO Plus. NewOpcodes is much older and is no longer being developed. However, there's quite a few CLEO scripts that rely on this plugin, so it is recommended to have installed. CLEO Plus is a newer plugin for CLEO which adds a lot of extra functionality to CLEO and makes it much easier for mod developers to create CLEO scripts. CLEO Plus also contains some of the functions that NewOpcodes adds to CLEO, meaning for certain CLEO scripts that require NewOpcodes, they will actually work with just CLEO Plus instead. However, CLEO Plus doesn't cover everything that NewOpcodes does, not right now anyway, so for this reason, I'd recommend having both NewOpcodes and CLEO Plus installed. So let's do that now. First, we'll install NewOpcodes. Step 1. Download NewOpcodes from the link in the description. Step 2. Open the archive you just downloaded, open the CLEO folder in the archive, and then copy newopcodes.cleo from the archive into your CLEO folder. That's it. Let's install CLEO Plus now. Step 1. Download CLEO Plus from the link in the description. Step 2. Open the archive. Open the English or Portuguese folder depending on the language you prefer. Open the CLEO folder in the archive and then copy cleoplus.cleo from the archive into your CLEO folder. And that's it. These are the two main CLEO plugins used by modders. Keep in mind, some mods may come with these CLEO plugins already, but you shouldn't need them as you already have them installed. So just skip these files if you see them included with mods. The only reason you may need them is if CLEO Plus gets an update and the mod requires the latest version of CLEO Plus. I'd recommend keeping an eye on the mod page for CLEO Plus to ensure you're always running the latest version. Next up is ModLoader. ModLoader was a relatively late addition to the San Andreas modding scene, coming out in 2013, nearly 10 years after San Andreas released. ModLoader is a godsend for people wanting to mod their game, and has made the process of installing mods so much simpler than it was previously. For this video, we're not going to dive too much into ModLoader right now. We'll just install it and use it to install some more ASI mods. However, in the next episode of this guide, we'll go much more in depth with ModLoader, and I'll show you exactly how it works. So, let's move on to installing ModLoader. ModLoader is another ASI plugin and it's very easy to install. Step 1. Download the latest version of ModLoader from the link in the description. Step 2. Open the archive you just downloaded, copy the ModLoader folder to your San Andreas folder, and then copy modloader.asi into your scripts folder. Step 3. Launch your game, start a new game, and make sure it loads CJ into the alley. Step 4. Once it does, exit the game and check the ModLoader folder. You should now see two new files, modloader.ini and modloader.log. If these files aren't there, something is wrong and your game hasn't got permission to create files. You'll have to move the game to another location on your PC where you don't require admin permission to create new files. And that's it, ModLoader is installed. For this ASI plugin, we installed it in our scripts folder instead of the main game folder, since it works perfectly in the scripts folder. You can place it in the main game folder if you like, but it's up to you. Next, we're going to install SilentPatch. This is one of the most essential mods we're going to install, as it fixes a huge number of issues with San Andreas. This patch will fix your mouse locking up, frame limiter locking your frame rate to 25 instead of 30, restores 16:9 resolutions such as 1080p, and so much more. I'll leave a link to the full list of fixes in the description. I have a mod showroom video covering SilentPatch in full, including configuring every option and showing off more of the fixes. I'd recommend watching that video after you finish this guide if you really want to get the most out of this mod. But by default, SilentPatch doesn't necessarily have to be configured. You should always have SilentPatch installed on your game. It fixes so many issues that it's basically a necessity, and it should be compatible with basically every mod out there. So let's install the mod. Step 1. Download the mod from the link in the description. Step 2. Open the archive you just downloaded. Now, you have three options on where you can install SilentPatch. As it's an ASI plugin, you can install it in the main game folder, you can install it in the scripts folder, or you can install it inside ModLoader. We're going to install it with ModLoader, as we now have ModLoader installed, and it works perfectly there. It's best to keep your mods organized inside ModLoader if you can. However, keep in mind, just like the scripts folder, not all ASI mods will work inside the ModLoader folder. However, the majority will, including SilentPatch. Again, I'll go much more in depth with ModLoader next episode, so just follow along for now. You'll understand what it is and how it works much better by the end of this guide. Step 3. Open your ModLoader folder and create a new folder called SilentPatch. Step 4. Simply copy silentpatch.sa.asi and silentpatch.sa.ini from the SilentPatch archive into your newly created SilentPatch folder. And that's basically it. SilentPatch is installed with ModLoader. SilentPatch also has a configuration file similar to ModLoader. These typically use the .ini format. A lot of ASI mods will likely have these, and they allow users to customize the mod with various options. These can be opened with Notepad or any other text editor. Like I said earlier, SilentPatch doesn't necessarily need to be configured, so we won't bother for this guide. However, if you are looking to get more out of the patch, you can check out the mod showroom I made featuring SilentPatch like I said before. Now, let's move on to our next mod. The next mod we'll install will be Widescreen Fix. Yes, another mod that fixes issues with San Andreas. While SilentPatch restores widescreen resolutions that were missing from version 1.0 of San Andreas, the game still hasn't really got correct widescreen support. When playing at widescreen resolutions, the HUD doesn't scale properly and is instead stretched across the screen. Here's a quick comparison of the game with and without Widescreen Fix. It also fixes things like the field of view. We're actually going to install an older version of Widescreen Fix, as the newer versions currently break menus made by some mods, due to a new version of Widescreen Fix changing how the game renders menus. Unfortunately, a lot of the older mods affected probably won't be updated, and I don't think it's worth breaking a load of other mods just to use the latest version of Widescreen Fix, which doesn't have many significant improvements anyway. Maybe this issue will be fixed in the future, but for now I'd recommend just using the old version of Widescreen Fix. So, let's install Widescreen Fix. Once again, it's another ASI mod and it works great with ModLoader, so we're going to install it the same way we did with SilentPatch. Step 1. Download the mod from the link in the description. Make sure it's the older version of the mod. Step 2. Open your ModLoader folder and create a new folder called Widescreen Fix. Step 3. Open the archive you just downloaded. You'll see two folders. Open the first one and copy gtasa.widescreenfix.asi and .ini to the Widescreen Fix folder you've just created in your ModLoader folder. Next, open the other folder in the archive and copy wshps.asi into the Widescreen Fix folder you just created in your ModLoader folder. And that's it, Widescreen Fix is installed. The mod has a few additional options in its configuration file. Just like SilentPatch though, you don't necessarily need to configure this mod. It works out of the box perfectly. So at this point, I'd once again recommend testing your game to make sure it works. It doesn't need to be an extensive test, as we haven't installed a lot. Simply launch the game, start a new game, and if it loads, you should be set to go. So next, we're going to install a limit adjuster. Now, there's a lot of confusion around limit adjusters and how they should be used, so I'm hoping to clear this up in this guide. Basically, in the San Andreas engine, there's set limits to a lot of things. So here's a simplified example. If the game engine has a limit that says only 5 vehicle models can be loaded at once, it will most likely crash if 6 vehicle models are loaded. Now, if a limit is surpassed, it won't always mean the game is going to crash either. For example, I've just changed the limit for corona shadows to 1. These are the shadows you see under lights, also known as coronas. However, as you can see, the game isn't crashing here. Instead, if the game goes over this limit, it will simply load just one of the corona shadows, as that's the limit I've set. That's basically how most limits work in San Andreas. There are limits for a massive number of things in the game. However, basically all of the ones that will prevent you from modding your game to your heart's content have been cracked and expanded by the modding community. Here's the thing though, I've often had people come to me complaining that their game is crashing, and they'll say that they tried changing limits in a limit adjuster and it didn't fix the issue. The thing is, you basically never have to mess with a limit adjuster unless a mod specifically tells you to, that you need to set a certain limit to a certain value. Otherwise, you shouldn't have to touch any of the settings inside a limit adjuster. Along with that, the only mods that would even need you to specifically set limits would be massive mods that add new places to the map, and even then, 99% of the time, they include their own settings for whatever limit adjuster they use for the project, so you're not really expected to know how to tweak limit adjusters anyway. Now, there's two main limit adjusters out there for San Andreas. There is Open Limit Adjuster and Fastman92 Limit Adjuster. Let's talk about these two. We'll start with Open Limit Adjuster. Open Limit Adjuster is very user-friendly and covers basically everything you'll need when simply installing the majority of San Andreas mods. With Open Limit Adjuster at default settings, the game is now capable of basically loading the entire map without any crashes. This includes every object on the map, such as trees and lampposts. This wouldn't be possible with the normal game limits, so you should never really run into a limits problem when using Open Limit Adjuster. Open Limit Adjuster makes a lot of limits dynamic instead of static. Here's the configuration file for Open Limit Adjuster. As you can see, a lot of the San Andreas limits are listed as unlimited rather than a set value. The limits set as unlimited will dynamically change to your needs if your game somehow goes over any of these limits while playing, so the game won't run into any issues. There are some limits which aren't unlimited, but these limits are increased compared to the normal game, and should be high enough for the majority of users. Open Limit Adjuster also allows you to view limits with the game running by pressing F5, which can be a useful feature for some. Now, what about the Fastman92 Limit Adjuster? This limit adjuster is a lot more robust, and it includes way more options than Open Limit Adjuster. For example, this limit adjuster allows modders to expand the game map massively, allowing them to do things like add Vice City and Liberty City outside of the original San Andreas map boundaries. However, simply expanding the map boundaries isn't enough, because the game only has a certain number of object IDs available, and Rockstar used most of them for the original San Andreas map, which left very few IDs available for modders to add new objects to the map. Except, this limit adjuster can also increase the number of IDs available to modders, which means adding Liberty City and Vice City to the game is now possible, along with even more objects if modders choose to do so. This wasn't possible before Fastman92 Limit Adjuster. We would usually need to replace objects that are already in the game, but with this limit adjuster, we don't have to. Fastman92 Limit Adjuster also allows users to add new vehicles and weapons to the game instead of replacing them as well. It's basically the ultimate tool for massive San Andreas mods that aim to expand the game in a major way. So, a conclusion. For the majority of people, Open Limit Adjuster is what you should be using. You shouldn't need to tweak anything, and it should cover basically everything you'll need when modding your game. Fastman92 Limit Adjuster should only be installed if a mod specifically says that you need it for the mod to work. This will mostly include really big mods such as GTA Underground, RIP, or GTA Mixed. Mods that add weapons or vehicles to the game will also need Fastman92 Limit Adjuster. But again, the mod author will specify that in the mod's installation instructions. Keep in mind I said add, not replace. The majority of mods will replace weapon or vehicle models already in the game. Open Limit Adjuster and Fastman92 Limit Adjuster are compatible with each other too by default. However, it is possible they won't work together if their settings have been changed from the default. If a mod doesn't specifically require the Fastman92 Limit Adjuster, you don't need it. So for this guide, we'll just use Open Limit Adjuster as it will cover the majority of your needs. And don't forget, if a mod doesn't specifically say that you need to increase any limits, you really shouldn't need to tweak a limit adjuster settings. Okay, you now know what limit adjusters do, and that unless told by a modder, you shouldn't mess with them. So let's move on and install Open Limit Adjuster, which is more than enough for our needs. Step 1. Download Open Limit Adjuster from the link in the description. Step 2. Open the archive you just downloaded and then copy the Open Limit Adjuster folder from the archive into your ModLoader folder. And that's it. Open Limit Adjuster is now installed. Okay, I know I literally just told you not to touch any limits in Open Limit Adjuster unless a mod requires you to do so, but there is one thing we're going to change. San Andreas has a thing called streaming memory. Out of the 4GB of RAM our game can now use, or 3GB if you're on a 32-bit system, some of that memory is allocated specifically for streaming the game world. Streaming is how the game world works. Objects stream in and out as you play, such as buildings, pedestrians, vehicles, etc. By default, San Andreas only allocates 64 megabytes to streaming. So if you install a high definition texture mod and the game only allows 64 megabytes of RAM to be used for the world streaming, it's very likely your game will look like this, as the size of the texture will use up all of the available streaming memory. This can be fixed by increasing how much memory the game can use, specifically for streaming. We installed a 4GB patch earlier, which allows our game to use up to 4GB of RAM overall, or 3GB if you're on a 32-bit system. So we can increase the streaming memory limit quite significantly using Open Limit Adjuster, as we have plenty of RAM available, so let's do that. Step 1. Open your ModLoader folder, open the Open Limit Adjuster folder, and then open the configuration file with any text editor. Step 2. Find the Memory Available option in the San Andreas section. This option controls how much memory the game can use for streaming. Don't get confused and think it controls how much memory the game uses altogether. Once you've found the option, you can see that by default the value is a percentage. However, you can also set a specific value in megabytes. So we're going to replace the default Open Limit Adjuster setting with our own value. So step 3, delete the 30% value and simply replace it with 512. Once you're done, save the file. This means that the game will now dedicate 512 megabytes to world streaming instead of the game's original setting of 64 megabytes. This should be more than enough for the majority of people. You really won't need more than this, and it's a perfect value for the average system. I wouldn't recommend touching this value again. Installing high definition textures should no longer cause issues with world streaming now, as you can see here. If for some reason you do need to tweak this value, I have a full video covering how streaming memory works, covering how the option works, and when you might need to tweak it. I'd recommend watching it at some point so you have a better understanding of it, but for now, this is all you need to know about streaming memory, and realistically, you won't need to change this value again. Once more, after you've made this change to Open Limit Adjuster, you really shouldn't play with any values here unless a mod specifically instructs you to. you're more likely to cause further issues changing values here than solving them, so just leave it as it is. And that will be all of the essential mods you'll need. I'd recommend making a backup of your game at this stage. If you haven't got space, don't worry about it, you can skip this, but it's handy to have in case you somehow mess up your game later on while modding. It means you won't have to install all the essential mods again. Again, if you found this guide helpful so far, please consider giving the video a like, it really helps. And that will be all for this episode. After following this video, your game should be a lot more stable overall, and you've installed all of the necessary mods that you'll need for installing other mods. In the next video, we're going to take an in-depth look at ModLoader, get familiar with some mod tools, and even create our own little mod, which will help you understand some of the San Andreas file types better. Thank you for watching part 2, and I'll see you in the next episode.